worst experience we had was pumping water from a river at 2 o'clock in the morning in about 7 degrees of frost, filling the water tanks and the engine tender. And the water obviously running back and splashing everywhere, and the water was freezing as it was running off the tanks, and we were getting wet, and the water was freezing on you as it landed, and that was the worst time. Even standing on the footplate of the engine, you could almost climb into the firebox and you were still freezing. It was very, very, very cold.
Locomotives are very labour intensive. It is said that if a steam locomotive goes wrong, it takes 1 minute to find the fault and 24 hours to fix it, whereas with if a diesel or electric locomotive goes wrong, it takes 24 hours to find the fault and 1 minute to fix it. And these are low-tech engines. They require a crew of at least 2, as the fireman is responsible for the maintenance of the fire in the grate, as well as the levels of water in the boiler. This is a full-time job. The driver, on the other hand, is obviously responsible for the actual operation of the engine. They're not always easy to operate. It is really quite old technology. The basic principles used by Stevenson in the early 1800s still apply. They've only really been refined. And driving a steam engine is something I've never done, but that I'm told is an art. Many of the drivers describe developing a relationship with their engines and describing them as almost living beings. The engines that the drivers really liked tended to be the big mainline engines, like the Class 25NCs, the 15Fs. These particular engines were mechanically fired. The grates were too big just to shovel coal in, so they had huge Archimedes screw arrangements that fed coal into the fire, and then an arrangement of steam jets that distributed the coal through the actual grate. The drivers also very much liked the engine that was probably the most numerous, the Class 19D, which was a branch line engine seen on most of the branch lines in South Africa. Unlike the big engines, it was hand fired, but most of the drivers who worked these engines really loved them. The big passenger engines, like the Pacifics, like the Class 16Es, that really very few were ever built, but they were built for high-speed operation, and they didn't have a lot of traction because they just had three sets of driving wheels. But some of them were capable of very high speed, which is quite remarkable on the South African railways, which in world terms is a narrow gauge railway. South African lines or main lines are 3-foot 6-inch gauge, as opposed to 4-foot 8.5 for most of the rest of the world. These Class 16Es in particular had 6-foot driving wheels and could easily reach speeds of 17 miles an hour on the 3-foot 6-inch gauge track, 120 kilometers.